How's everybody doing out there in podcast land as we inch and creep ever closer to Christmas and New Year's and the dawn of 2025? Welcome to another fantastic, extraordinary episode of The Fortress of Rock. December the 20th, 2024, episode 175. I am your gracious and humble host, the Ayatollah of Rock and Rolla, the Maestro Kevin Crane. As always, glad, ecstatic to have you aboard for this rock and roll extravaganza that again we call the Fortress of Rock. Last episode before Christmas, and I'll say it now and I'll probably say it a couple more times, but have a safe, joyous, merry holiday season. Merry Christmas. Won't wish you Happy New Year's yet because we'll still have one more episode sandwiched in between Christmas and New Year's. And you would think, I've been alluding to it over the past month, we'd be winding down here and these episodes would be shorter with less content, but that is absolutely not the case. Tonight, this particular Friday night is going to be spectacular, ridiculous, cool beyond all belief, because not only do we have full segments going back in time with I Want to Go Back, and here starting off with News of the World, our tribute to the late, great Freddie Mercury and Queen, but also, as promised, my Christmas present to you coming in breakdown. Top 5 albums, top 5 songs, top 5 concerts for 2024. But as I mentioned, let us start off with news of the world. A lot going on in the world of rock and roll. So let's get into it because it is going to be a jam-packed first segment here. Going to be all over the map here. Going to kind of be going all over the place. Starting off with another sad commentary on the state of music commercially, the business of music. Now, I don't know if I ever told you guys this. I probably mentioned it once or twice since we've been doing this for over 3 years now, but I used to work at Camelot Music. Back in the 80s, one of the big music chains across the country. You had Camelot Music, you had Peaches down south, you had Musicland, and then you had Sam Goody. Sam Goody still hanging on, still clinging on, kind of like Blockbuster Video. Sam Goody still had 2 brick and mortar stores left. And unfortunately, in the coming months, they will be closing down. There will be no more physical Sam Goody stores anymore. The last 2 stores are in St. Clairsville, Ohio, and Medford, Oregon. And they will be shutting down. Don't have specific dates for both stores, but by all accounts, they will be shutting down within the next 6 months. Once again, another sad death knell for the sale of physical music. And of course, you guys know how I feel about physical music. Number one, I like the tangible product. I like the liner notes. I like the cover art. Also, like to contribute more money to the artists. There is an obligation there. We as fans have an obligation. I'm not saying we have to go nutsy cuckoo crazy and buy these $100 reissued box sets, but as I look at my thousands of CDs, I say at least I have contributed to the coffers of the band and the performers themselves. When I go on Spotify, I feel dirty because they are getting nothing, next to nothing, less than pennies on the dollar for me to play one of their songs. At least I know when I've bought the CD that I'm contributing directly in some way, more than Spotify, in some way to the bank accounts of these artists to keep them interested and to keep them commercially viable so they want to keep playing and keep creating new music. And you guys know how I feel about the music business, the concert business, and we're going to talk about that next. They'll still try to screw the consumer. They'll still try to screw the fan every chance they can. CD prices are going up. I won't buy into this whole vinyl resurgence because the prices are ridiculous. But I'm still doing the best that I can. Now, I will also say, in a nice little segue here, by the way, one last RIP, we loved you, Sam Goody. Just like Camelot and Musicland, all of them. Peaches. But going back into the weeds about how much it costs to own music, how much it costs to go to see a concert. Yes, you can call this my weekly rant about how music is too expensive. No matter what we're talking about, the physical product, the concert experience. Now we're going to talk a little bit more later about Tremonti, the first new album that'll be coming out in 2025. And right now, I'm very discouraged and very unhappy with what they're charging here now with less than a month before the actual release date, what they're charging for a CD for this album. You can't get it anywhere on a pre-order for less than $15.99 or thereabouts, give or take a quarter. And that's just ridiculously too expensive for a brand new album. But it's worse, of course, as I complain week in and week out about the concert experience. And again, I have no pending concerts for the first time in over 12 years at least. I always have concert tickets, whether physical or digital, on my phone or stashed in my bedroom. Whether it's a month from now, whether it's 8 months, 10 months from now, I have always had concert tickets on the agenda, a concert scheduled. And it's sad, but after the Night Ranger concert a few weeks ago, nothing. Absolutely nothing. And part of it is because of the cost. So now we're going to go on the two different sides of the political spectrum. And I don't like to get into politics here on the Fortress of Rock, but sometimes it's a necessity. So, on the side of the conservatives, the Republicans, Kid Rock has met with Pam Bondi, who is the nominee under the incoming administration, the Donald Trump administration, the nominee for Attorney General. And Kid Rock put out a statement, a social media post, about his positive meeting with Pam Bondi and how he is going to try to lead the charge to make concert going more affordable and less despicable and crooked for us fans. Now, I give Kid Rock's proclamation a golf clap. That's my golf clap. Because while I admire his spirit and his anger, I also remember a couple years ago when I wanted to go see Kid Rock and his prices were a little bit ridiculous. And I can't blame all of that on Ticketmaster and Live Nation. So Kid Rock might be talking out of both sides of his mouth here. He wants to champion the cause for the fans, yet I think he's still doing okay with what he charges for concert tickets. But in no way, shape, or form is he nearly as bad or as much of a liar as we flip to the other side of the spectrum, our current president, Joe Biden, who just got in front of a microphone here within the past week and lied to everyone about how he has helped to fix all the problems with going to concerts and sporting events. Yes, I'm sorry. He's a liar. I hate to use that strong of a word. He's a liar. And this is not the first time on record, and he's not the first politician. They all do it. But for our purposes here on the Fortress of Rock, he is lying specifically about what he claims the FTC just fixed. The Federal Trade Commission pushed forth a ruling that our president, our current president, says banned junk fees on live event ticket sales. That is incorrect. That is a falsehood, and yes, that is a lie. The FTC ruling that just came down here recently did nothing other than say you have to disclose all fees up front to the consumer. And we all know, getting ahead of the game, even though they're snakes, Ticketmaster and Live Nation have been doing this for a while now. They call it all-in pricing. They don't do it for every event. Now they're going to have to. But this is where you are required to tell everybody up front when they want to select a seat for a concert or a sporting event what the final cost will be. You can't say, hey, face value is $55, and then turn around and you get to the end where you got to start paying and put your credit card in, and all of a sudden it's $90, $100, because of all the fees and the local taxes. Now they're finding ways around this. I have mentioned here within the last month or two, my former favorite venue down outside of Indianapolis, the Ruoff Music Center, is now charging for parking where there is no other place to park. So they're basically requiring $20 extra per car, and you have to rent lawn chairs. If you have lawn seats, you cannot bring your own chairs. So they're finding ways in anticipation. Again, they're not stupid. They knew this was coming. So they're finding new and exciting ways, note sarcasm, to gouge the consumer. And that's where I'm hoping Kid Rock will actually get something done. Because Joe Biden got nothing done, and he is lying to us. He did not get rid of the junk fees. All he did was with the FTC, got all the ticketing agencies, all the ticket brokers to now tell you up front how much they're screwing you for. It's a very, very, very small, tiny baby step forward, but it is not the progress that we need. And once again, as a big-time consumer of live events, especially concerts, They've lost a lot of money already from me in 2025 since I have been shying away from AC/DC and Toto and Men at Work because it's just too much when you add up all the ancillary fees and costs involved. Okay, that rant is over. The collapse of the physical music industry, the commercial aspect, the continued lies that we get when it comes to trying to quote unquote fix the live music business for the fans. Let's move on more into the music itself. Now, we knew that there was something going on with U2's drummer, Larry Mullen Jr., as he has pulled away from performing live with the band in recent years. Now he's come out and basically said he has something called dyscalculia. I am not one of these people that is a big fan of everything that everybody has wrong is a disease or is some kind of a medical condition. We're all different. We've all got different freaks and foibles and idiosyncrasies, and they're not all diseases, and they're not all definable maladies. So, Larry Mullen Jr., drummer for U2, has dyscalculia, which is a number-related learning disability, where he says it's very hard for him to count and do anything with numbers, so that makes it hard for him to keep time with the band, keep rhythm, especially in a live setting. So basically, this is a mystery solved. Now we know why Larry Mullen Jr. has pulled back from his work with U2. And I am not trying to disparage anybody with dyscalculia, but I'm saying we all have issues and problems, and they're not all medically definable. Sometimes we're just messed up. Sometimes we're just flawed human beings, and I have a certain flaw, and she has a certain flaw, and that guy has a certain flaw. They're not all definable medical conditions, okay? Sometimes we're just messed up in one area or another. Okay, in terms of media other than strictly music, we've been getting a lot more into TV and streaming specials, movies. A lot of music movies have been coming out. So we're gonna dive into that for a minute here. Now, I am not the biggest fan of Saturday Night Live. I used to be. I used to be a huge, huge fan of Saturday Night Live till about 20 years ago, when it stopped being funny and all they wanted to do was skew political and skewer Republicans. Not balanced attacks like they used to have in the old days. We used to get just as much humor ripping the Clintons back in the 90s that we did ripping George Bush. And that's something we could all relate to. It's okay if you're going to be fair and balanced, but SNL has all of a sudden decided, no, we'll never, ever, ever make fun of Barack Obama or Joe Biden anymore, ever again, or Hillary Clinton. But we'll just rip into Donald Trump nonstop. That equals unfunny. No classic characters anymore, like Buckwheat or Mr. Robinson. going all the way back to the original cast, the samurai. You know, there are no classic characters anymore. Roseanne, Rosanna, Dana. It's all garbage now. But that being said, I've always liked and admired, except again, maybe over the last 20 years, what Saturday Night Live has done with music. And I'm sure a lot of you out there are going to argue with me and dispute, oh, the current music artists are great, and oh, you don't get the current humor. Sure, whatever. But back when I watched it, and I watched it from almost the very beginning all the way through to maybe 2008, 2009, religiously. And a big part of the appeal, almost equal to wanting to laugh for an hour and a half, wanting some edgy sketch humor. Big appeal was who's going to be playing music on the show, who's going to get to play 2 or 3 songs on the show. So I'm very happy to report that because we've got the 50th anniversary of Saturday Night Live this year, this season, on January 27th on NBC, now there's going to be a huge blowout 3-hour celebration of the 50th anniversary in February, but on January 27th, we get a specific SNL anniversary special about the music. Ladies and gentlemen, 50 years of SNL music will air January the 27th on NBC. Now, it will be interesting to see what gets edited, some of the controversial moments. Do we dare now in this day and age where things have loosened up a little bit, standards have loosened up a little bit, where we show Sinead O'Connor ripping up a picture of the Pope, where we hear the Replacements cursing and swearing throughout their performance, Nirvana performing Rape Me? So we'll see what standards and practices says. Now, I don't know. The one thing about this that I don't know yet is how long the music celebration for SNL will be on January the 27th, but I will still watch, and I, of course, will give you my full review that Friday night here on the Fortress of Rock. We mentioned the movie Becoming Led Zeppelin, the first fully authorized documentary / concert film from Led Zeppelin. Now, a couple weeks ago, we told you about its initial release. Becoming Led Zeppelin will initially get an early screening on February the 5th in 18 markets, and then 2 days later on the 7th, will debut in about 200 IMAX theaters across the country. Then the week after, here is the update for you. The week after, Becoming Led Zeppelin will expand to approximately 1,000 screens across North America, February the 14th. There you go. Wonderful Valentine's Day present for the rockers out there. Valentine's Day, February 14th, 2025, Becoming Led Zeppelin will hit on 1,000 screens across North America. And then, of course, Christmas Day. I'm doing this just because of an obligation I feel I have to you, my fans, my listeners, my podcast buddies. I'm not a Bob Dylan guy, so this will probably be the only time I mention this. There's a remote chance when this movie hits streaming, I may possibly watch it, but the odds are about 8% of that. Opening December the 25th, already getting rave reviews, Timothée Chalamet as Bob Dylan in A Complete Unknown. So by the time we do our next episode, that movie will be out. And I will report on how well it's doing. I'm always interested in these rock and roll films, these biopics, as we've got plenty more coming over the next few years. But Bob Dylan, Timothy Chalamet, A Complete Unknown, opening Christmas Day, December the 25th. I believe approximately 2,500 screens across North America. Interesting news from Mike Rutherford. Mike Rutherford, of course, formerly of Genesis. I do believe he is still keeping Mike and the Mechanics alive. In a recent interview, Mike Rutherford says somewhere, and we get this a lot from these performers, these rock and roll artists, somewhere he's got a couple boxes of cassettes. And one of those cassettes features a collaboration between him and Eddie Van Halen. This coming from, of course, the Van Halen news desk. And it's coming right from the mouth of Mike Rutherford, so I don't know if you can say he's lying. The funny thing is, Mike Rutherford says he had a good time collaborating, jamming with Eddie Van Halen. And again, I hope he finds this cassette that features snippets of songs they wrote together. But he said the ill-fated collaboration was doomed from the start because Eddie liked to work throughout the wee hours of the night. Mike Rutherford, kind of like a normal 9 to 5 guy, couldn't get the creative juices flowing at 2 or 3 in the morning. So just something fun. I doubt anything will ever come of it. Unfortunately, being a little cynical about this, I doubt that Mike Rutherford at this stage in his life is going to delve into these boxes of cassettes he's got to help satisfy us maniacal Van Halen fans out there. Although we would love, I'm sure people outside of just the Van Halen fan base would love to hear what this music sounded like between Mike Rutherford and Eddie Van Halen. All right, we do have a couple moments of silence in the world of rock and roll. First up, Slim Dunlap. Slim Dunlap played guitar for the Replacements. Yes, I've made 2 Replacements references here in our first segment. Slim Dunlap was a guitarist for the Replacements from 1987 until their initial breakup in 1991. He played on, I believe, a couple of their more successful commercial albums after they signed to, I believe it was Sire Records. So Slim Dunlap, guitarist for the Replacements, has passed away, along with Michael Brewer. Michael Brewer was part of the duo Brewer and Shipley. That might sound vaguely familiar to the older fans out there here on the Fortress. One-hit wonders known for the mega hits at the time, One Toke Over the Line. So thoughts and prayers go out to the family, the friends of Slim Dunlap and Michael Brewer. Little tiny bit of touring news here on the Fortress. We mentioned Gene Simmons going out on the road for what was initially reported to be just a few dates. 5 shows. He has added more dates now. So Gene Simmons will be playing 16 total dates in North America. 11 dates added to the original 5 in April and May in North America. And then sad news, especially for those of you in the Northeast, the New Jersey music scene in particular. Somebody who, if you're a music fan, you know the name, but success-wise never really grew outside of that New York, New Jersey area. Southside Johnny, of course, of Southside Johnny and the Asbury Jukes, retiring immediately from touring. Played a show here recently, December the 14th, only could get through a couple songs, had to get off the stage. The Jukes finished the performance on their own. All remaining dates, including a New Year's Eve show, canceled. Something must have happened very, very serious. Because, again, he walked off the stage on December the 14th. Immediately, dates canceled. Release saying that this is all due to health issues. And, of course, Southside Johnny, 76 years old. Very, very understandable. And again, rock and roll can be regional. Of course, we celebrate the worldwide blockbuster success of our bands, the big tours across the US and Japan and Europe, and the multi-mega million selling albums of years gone by. But these regional acts like Southside Johnny and the Asbury Jukes, really the heart of rock and roll, the beating heart of rock and roll. There was a band around here in the area where the Fortress of Rock stands. There was a band called Lillian Axe that used to play at a club called the White House just across the border in Michigan. That was a very huge, big local band around here. It happens everywhere. LA, Texas, Florida. The local bands. Now, sometimes they grow and do become popular nationally, but sometimes with a performer like Southside Johnny and the Asbury Jukes, they really just have that local, that diehard local following, but you still hear about them across the nation. You still hear through the rock and roll grapevine about these great performers and these great bands. So with a tinge of sadness, that's how we're going to wrap up News of the World. But I got a transitional news item for you as we shift from News of the World to Breakdown and our big countdown of the top 5 albums, songs, and concerts of 2024. This is how sad things have gotten. I started the podcast off talking about the demise of Sam Goody and the final 2 stores shutting down. When we get to the end of the show, you know now this year I've been doing the Fortress of Rock's top album and top songs of the week in tribute to the old Billboard charts, stressing the old Billboard charts. This is how bad things are. This is why you want to pay attention to Breakdown and my list for the Fortress of Rock of the top album, songs, and concerts, because it matters more. It's more personal. It's not cold, pathetic numbers that Billboard has cooked up. Billboard's top rock album of 2024, as they have released their list of the top albums of the year. This is another little quirk that they have brought back for their album charts that I cannot stand. And I have talked about it many times. Just to refresh your memory, Billboard now allows streaming to influence their album charts. So that means that old albums, greatest hits compilations from the 70s and the 80s get to have a major imprint on the current music scene and the current album charts. So that being said, in a terrible, awful, pathetic segue into breakdown, the top rock album of 2024. Number one, the thing that stinks is that this album only reached number 34 overall. So there were 33 other albums more popular than this that were not rock and roll. Country, hip-hop, rap, pop. So the top rock album only could reach number 34 on the year-end charts. But the top rock album of the year, Fleetwood Mac's Rumors. Yes, an album from the 70s was the top rock album of the year. The number 34 overall album of the year on the Billboard charts. How pathetic is that? What does that say about us? What does that say about Billboard and the way they calculate their top albums and their top songs? You guys know I think it's ridiculous. But that is why you come to the Fortress of Rock, is because I will set the record straight and I will give you the true top albums, top songs, top concerts of the year in rock and roll. It is time for Breakdown, our tribute to Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers this week. We take a break from new stuff. 1 week only. And now we give you our recap of the year in music 2024. All right, here it is, the moment you have all been waiting for. Specifically, you've been waiting 1 year for this moment here on the Fortress of Rock. I love doing this episode. I love it because it makes me look back, forces me to re-listen to all the great songs and albums of the past year, reinforces some in my mind. Maybe some I go, not as great as I initially thought. But that's what's awesome about rock and roll. So it is time for our yearly look back at the year in music. This case would be, of course, 2024. Top 5 albums, top 5 songs, top 5 concerts. And we're going to start off with concerts. Now, I have mentioned Mr. Doom and Gloom. I have mentioned that maybe in the future there won't be that many concerts to choose from. It might get to the point where I can't do this countdown anymore, because what good is it if I only go to see 5 concerts ranking the top 5 of the year? But in this case, I had 15 concerts to choose from. 15 shows I saw in 2024. Very, very workable amount in order to distill down to the top 5 of the year. And I would say ironically, maybe, considering this is a transitional year where I'm not going to get to see 12, 14, 15, 16 shows a year, that the last year where I got to see a full slate of shows The top 5 are all old, familiar faces, names, songs that we all know and love. Not shocking, considering this is all about classic rock. But we did see a couple bands, newer bands. This past year, I saw Seether. I saw Rival Sons, of course, with Clutch. But yes, most of it was older bands. But just because they're older bands doesn't mean they are what I would say top level performers in the pantheon of the Fortress of Rock. I was fortunate enough to see a lot of my top, let's say top 15 bands of all time. And a big chunk of them ended up in the top 5. So we'll start off counting down from 5 to 1. My 5th best concert of 2024 was Living Color, live at the Sweetwater Performance Pavilion in Fort Wayne, Indiana. I finally got to see Living Color as a headliner for the first time ever, and they did not disappoint. Of course, they played the usual hits you would expect. And then, of course, Vernon Reid recently played within the last couple years with MC5, so they did a fantastic version of Kick Out the Jams. A tremendous show. Everything I hoped it would be and more. So Living Color in Fort Wayne, Indiana is my number 5 show of 2024. My number 4 show, it doesn't get much more familiar than this. Band I have seen, by my count, probably 8 times. Could be 7, could be 9, but I'm going to stick with the middle ground and 8. I try to keep meticulous notes. Plus, there is I saw them as a headliner versus I saw them as an opening act. Where do you count that type of minutia to deal with? But Jackal at the 8 Second Saloon, the family reunion. They mentioned during the show it was the 11th time they have played the 8 Second Saloon in Indianapolis, Indiana. I know we missed them on the year of COVID, of course, in 2020. I know we missed them in 2023 because they played on Thanksgiving and not on Black Friday like normal. And I know I missed them the first time around. I don't think we saw them the very first show when they started this yearly tradition. I still feel like we missed one other show in there, so that would be 7. And then I've seen them open for Damn Yankees, so that would be 8 for me. So anyway, short story long, Jackal put on their typical solid show. Sound was much better. The sound was much better this year than in past years. Solid 90-minute set. You pretty much got all the songs you were hoping for. Jackal, number 4 on the Fortress of Rock's list of the top concerts of 2024. Number 3, and this show should have been much higher if it wasn't for the weather. This probably would have been my top show of the year, but because I know we got cheated out of 4 songs due to the weather, multiple delays due to the weather, So the show was on, off, on, off. Yes, I'm talking about Sammy Hagar on the Best of All Worlds Van Halen Tribute Tour at the Ruoff Music Center in Noblesville, Indiana. Still an absolutely fantastic show with Joe Satriani kicking ass and taking names, doing his best to replicate all the Eddie Van Halen guitar solos, hooks, grooves, and moves. Of course, Michael Anthony always by Sammy Hagar's side. Kenny Aronoff stepping in, taking over for Jason Bonham on drums. But to hear Sammy finally delve into some classic Van Halen songs like 5150 and Judgment Day. Now, he kind of stayed away from the power ballads, which I liked. Supposedly, they're going to do this all again. I don't know if it's going to be 2025 or 2026, but I'm a little worried about the second go round, because that's when they'll bring in Dreams and Love Walks In. Not necessarily my favorites in the Van Halen catalog, but I got the ones I love on this tour in this show. The only reason this isn't number one is because, again, the weather cut the show short. Still got an hour and 45 minutes, but we would have gotten over 2 hours without the weather interfering. So Mother Nature, I hate you for doing this to me on a show that you know I'd been looking forward to for so long. Sammy Hagar, Best of All Worlds Tour. Number 3 on our list of the best shows of 2024. Number 2, another old familiar friend, another band I have seen right up there with Jackal probably 7 times. Collective Soul at 20 Monroe Live in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Coming off the release of their double album, Here to Eternity. Great show. I would expect nothing less. I have never seen a bad Collective Soul show. They are dependable. They always give their best. This night in particular, though, they seemed like they were a little bit looser. They were having a little bit more fun amongst the band members. A lot of jokes pointed at bass player Will Turpin, which was fun. They just seemed like they were having a little bit more fun than what I've seen in the past. Maybe it was the venue. Venue maybe 90% sold out. In this day and age, that's pretty good. As opposed to some of the shows I've seen them in the past, whether they were opening acts or maybe performing as a headliner to a half-full venue, and that's got to be a little disheartening. But they always bring their best. But at least on this night, they seem like they were having a lot more fun. So Collective Soul, my number 2 show for 2024. Number 1 concert for 2024. Call it recency bias. Call it what you will. The last show I saw just a couple weeks ago at the Lerner Theater in Elkhart, Indiana, Night Ranger. And yes, once again, a band like Collective Soul and Jackal I have seen 7 or 8 times in my life. Opening act, headliners, whatever it might have been. Just like Jackal, just like Collective Soul, they always bring it each and every time I've seen them. For some reason, this show was it just hit me a little harder than the shows in the past. And all the shows in the past have been spectacular. I prefer to see them as a headliner. I want the full hour and a half, or in this case, hour and 40-minute set list. Get another 5 or 6 songs deeper into the catalog, deeper into the first 2 albums, Dawn Patrol and Midnight Madness. And I was fine with the set list because I got Touch of Madness, I got, of course, Night Ranger, got Call My Name, which, great song. Great song from the early years. Didn't hear Secret of My Success, which is fine. That's one I would be okay if they just took that out of the set list altogether. Didn't get Rumors in the Air. Would have liked to have heard Rumors in the Air, but can't complain. Can't complain with the set list they put out there. We got the requisite Damn Yankee songs that we get every time around now, which is fine. From what I could tell, sometimes still on tour, and I've seen it in the past, sometimes they'll do their little homage to some old school stuff. Brad Gillis, for a time, played with Ozzy Osbourne, so they'll play Crazy Train. We didn't get that this time around. It's fine. I've seen it in the past. Don't need to see it every time out. But it's just fitting and appropriate. If this is my semi-retirement from concert going, it would be fitting that Night Ranger would be the best show of that year. Or I said, can't afford it anymore, can't do double-digit shows anymore. If the mighty VH is not around, then Night Ranger takes the crown. So my number 1 show of the year, Night Ranger, at the Lerner Theater in Elkhart, Indiana. Let's move on to the top songs of the year. Top 5 songs of the year. And this year was a little interesting as I put these lists together. I didn't try to do this on purpose. It kind of just fell out this way. I actually had to do a double check and say, are you sure you really want to go down this road, Maestro? Are you sure? Because it doesn't seem right. What I did was I have my top 5 songs. None of these songs are featured in my top 5 albums of the year. So in a way, I'm giving you a little bit of a spoiler. If you hear somebody mentioned here in the top 5 songs of the year, that means they will not appear in the top 5 albums of 2024. Song number 5 on our countdown of the best of 2024 begins with the title track from Pearl Jam's Dark Matter. Love this song. And Dark Matter was a very solid album, but it's still a little inconsistent. A little bit inconsistent. But it's one of their better albums. Probably their best in a decade, if not longer. And it has one of the greatest lines, the greatest lyrics of the year, as I paraphrase. It's strange these days when somebody else pays for everybody else's mistakes. Great line from Eddie Vedder. So Dark Matter, number 5, top songs of 2024. Number 4, this guitar riff is just so cool. And the song reminds me of old school Dire Straits. And Mark Knopfler keeps going down that road where he's getting a little bit more mellow and going into the folk and the country sound. And he's been doing that for a long time, for most of his solo career. But off of the album One Deep River, Two Pairs of Hands is my number 4 song for 2024 because it sounds so much like old school, early Dire Straits. especially that killer guitar riff. Number 3 on my list of top songs of 2024, I said we're not repeating songs and albums, but I didn't say anything about songs and concerts. My number 3 song of 2024 off of their double album, Here to Eternity, Collective Soul, Bluer Than So Blue. Another, just like Mark Knopfler, another killer guitar hook, guitar riff. This is classic Collective Soul at their best, at their finest. Bluer Than So Blue, my number 3 song for 2024. Number 2, a throwaway, a song left on the cutting room floor. And this album just missed the cut for the top 5 albums of the year. And it was a collection of throwaways, archival songs, vault songs, if you will. Yes, it is U2. First single off How to Reassemble an Atomic Bomb, their collection of 10 songs from the How to Dismantle an Atomic Bomb sessions. The upbeat, earworm, energetic Picture of You, X plus W, is my number 2 song for 2024. My number 1 song for 2024, and this is why you have to pay attention. Now that we did this all throughout 2024, you have to pay attention to the end of the show when I do the weekly charts for the Fortress of Rock, is because they matter. Not only do they matter week by week, the stats will accumulate. If you notice a pattern where I have picked a song 3 or 4 or 5 weeks as my top song of the year, or one of the top songs of the week, this is the song of the year because it was probably number 1 week in and week out more than any other song. My number 1 song for 2024 is Myles Kennedy, Say What You Will, the leadoff single from his solo album, The Art of Letting Go. I just can't get enough of this song. Great guitar riff, great lyrics, great hook, great chorus, great everything. So Myles Kennedy, although, as you now know, Myles Kennedy's album, The Art of Letting Go, did not make my top 5. He, however, does get the number 1 song here in 2024 on the Fortress of Rock with Say What You Will. Maybe he'll get a little extra present, a little extra prize at the end of the show as well. So that moves us to the big prize of the year, my number 1 award. I always say, albums matter. And I heard somewhere, I cannot remember who, a big-time rock star recently said something about who makes albums anymore. With the music industry the way it is, who really makes albums anymore? Very disheartening to hear. I care about albums. I will always care about albums. The magic, the synergy, the connection you get with those magical 12 or 13 songs when they mesh together. There are still great albums out there. They are few and far between. But we were able to piece together. Wasn't too hard this year. Wasn't too hard. And before we get into the top 5 albums, let me do this. let me give some honorable mentions for all three categories before we get into our top 5 albums of 2024. Now, in concerts, which shows just missed the cut? Roger Clyne and the Peacemakers, one of my favorite small bands, was very good, but in terms of concerts, had a flaw in the middle, doing a request only middle section, and he really, really did not play his top level set list. He left a couple, 2, 3 songs off his set list that I would never have expected him to. Still a great show nonetheless. Stone Temple Pilots playing the entirety of Purple was awesome. Seeing Pat Benatar for the first time, tremendous. And seeing Lynch Mob and REO Speedwagon, separate shows of course, for the final time, respectively, both very cool shows. In terms of songs that just missed the cut for our top 5, and I'm still going to stay away from the albums. I'm going to give you songs that are not featured on our top 5 albums. But Rat, Reach for the Sky, unreleased track from Out of the Cellar, great song. The Cold Stairs had a couple tremendous songs that just missed the cut off of their album The Southern. Looking for a Fight, Level, Floor Blues, and Mortality Blues. Kings of Leon, Mustang. Very quirky, weird, wild, wacky song that I loved from Can We Please Have Fun. Just missed the cut. High and Dry by Soul Asylum, the last song on their brand new 2024 album, Slowly But Surely, was another song in contention for our top 5 of the year. Even though I was very disappointed in Green Day's Saviors, the last 2 Green Day albums have done next to nothing for me. I did love the song Living in the 20s. Then finally, and there's still a bunch of songs out there I'm leaving off the table, but finally, because we got to move along here, Tears for Fears, The Girl That I Call Home, one of 4 new songs off their live album, Songs for a Nervous Planet. Alright, so now we get to the big category. The one I always look forward to every year because it matters the most. The top 5 albums of the year. Number 5. Didn't like his last solo album very much, but this one is great because it recaptures a lot of the sound from his days with Alice in Chains. Now, Alice in Chains is not broken up. They are still technically functioning. But for some reason, Jerry Cantrell has been happy to focus on his solo career. This brand new album in 2024, I Want Blood, very good. Very, very good. And it lands at number 5 on our top 5 albums of 2024 list. Vilified was one of those songs that just missed the cut for our best songs of the year. But there are a lot of really good tracks on I Want Blood by Jerry Cantrell. Number 5 on our countdown. Number 4, maybe a surprise. Maybe a bit of a surprise, but even though these guys are in their 70s for the most part, the original members, the long-standing members, it still rocks. They're smart enough to know what their limitations are, what they can do, what they can't do. Equals One from Deep Purple. The first three singles were all standout tracks. Portable Door, Pictures of You, Lazy Sod. But the rest of the album ain't too shabby. I love this album, and I've never been a huge, fanatical Deep Purple fan. I've kind of delved in and out on Deep Purple's career, but I'm glad I got this album. I will listen to it over and over and over again. Equals One by Deep Purple, our number 4 album of the year here on the Fortress of Rock. Now, the top 3 have pretty much been set in stone for the last 3 or 4 months. It would have taken a seismic shift to move these albums, either out of the top 3 or change their position. Number 3, Invincible Shield by Judas Priest, the deluxe edition. You got to get the deluxe edition with the 3 extra songs, because these 3 extra songs are all top-notch, top-level Priest. But this is a solid, solid album from Judas Priest from beginning to end. I find it funny that we talked about this here about a month ago. The Grammys picked the weakest song on the album to nominate Judas Priest for a Grammy for, which is Crown of Horns. This album, though, especially the deluxe edition featuring the standout closing track, The Lodger, it's just fantastic. Rob Halford and the boys are not slowing down. I hesitate to say get out there and make another album, because I always prefer when a band I love goes out on a high note. Van Halen did. That's my opinion. I thought A Different Kind of Truth was fantastic. Invincible Shield is fantastic. I would just hate to see Judas Priest go one album too far and put out a clunker to close out their career. Number 2 on our countdown of the best albums of 2024, a fantastic return to form for the Black Crowes. Just like Deep Purple. I can't claim to be the biggest Black Crowes fan in the world, although, as opposed to Deep Purple, I do own the entire Black Crowes catalog. But they, like Deep Purple, highs and lows, hits and misses. There are times when I get excited about them, times when I really don't care all that much. This was a fantastic, brilliant, again, return to form for the Robinsons. This reminded me of the energy that I felt listening to their first 2 albums. Happiness Bastards by the Black Crowes is number 2 on our countdown of the top albums of 2024. So that leaves us with number 1. And if you've been paying attention, you've been doing your math, you've been counting cards, as they say in Vegas. Process of elimination, if you're a fan of the Fortress of Rock, you should know by now what the number 1 album is. Jack White, No Name. A surprise album initially, given away one weekend to customers at Third Man Records. Of course, Jack White owns Third Man. And initially when you hear this, you go, oh, he's being arrogant. Are we, as the general public, all the rock and roll fans, are we going to get to hear this? And supposedly the albums he gave away had little notes on them saying, rip this, share this. But no need, because yes, he did the right thing, and eventually down the road, a couple weeks, a month down the road, 2 months down the road, whatever it was, you could buy the digital version, you could buy the physical version of No Name. And thank the rock and roll gods, because this album is the best thing Jack White has done since Icky Thump with the White Stripes. It is tremendous from beginning to end. This is the one album above all others that deserves to be best album of the year. Now, could I be a jerk? And could I rip this album apart, as great as it is, and say, okay, let's take Old Scratch Blues and make that one of the top songs of the year, or Tonight Was a Long Time Ago, or That's How I'm Feeling? Sure. But as I mentioned, for some strange reason this year, it just felt wrong. And I had to keep the top 5 songs separate from the top 5 albums. No Name is so brilliant. And again, harkens back to the classic White Stripes sound of Icky Thump and especially Elephant, that it just felt wrong to start dissecting it into bits and pieces. It is just a phenomenal, fantastic, cohesive whole. And if you have not listened to No Name by now, you've got to listen to No Name. Jack White, No Name. The number 1 album of the year here. The prestigious award. The one big prestigious award we give out every year. Number 1 top album of the year for 2024 is No Name by Jack White. Woo! Always feels good to knock out the best of lists for the year. So now we settle back in, we move back into a normal groove, which means I am sauntering over, I am wandering over to the garage here at the Fortress of Rock, where Doc Brown, eagerly awaiting his Christmas present, haha, he thinks I got him something. Ah, what a sucker. Doc Brown getting into the rock and roll DeLorean, getting ready to check the dials, check the gauges, fire the DeLorean up to 1.21 gigawatts, take us out into the rock and roll time stream for our weekly jaunt into the history of rock and roll. I Want to Go Back, our tribute to the late, great Eddie Money, anniversaries of classic album releases, birthdays, moments in rock and roll history. But while we're getting fired up, getting up to speed, I've got to quickly take care of business. 3 main sources for some of the ideas. Not all of them, but some of them, that I use in segment 1, News of the World, and here in segment 3, I Want to Go Back. UltimateClassicRock.com, ThisDayInMusic.com, and of course I've already referenced the Van Halen Newsdesk.com when I was talking about that story about Mike Rutherford of Genesis and him working briefly with Eddie Van Halen on new material. Get out there and dig it up, Mike. Listen to those cassettes, dude. And then, of course, you found us somewhere. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You have options, you have choices. If you have a preferred podcast listening platform, we're probably on it. You can find the Fortress of Rock new episodes every Friday night on Spotify, Pocket Casts, Apple, iHeartRadio, Overcast, Amazon Music, Castbox, Audible, and Good Pods. And don't forget to check out the Facebook page every weekend for fun stuff. It's already out there, it's already dropped. The Weekend Rock Project every Friday night, roughly right around the same time. The new episode for the Fortress of Rock drops on Friday night. The Weekend Rock Project is also available. I give you a word, a name, a theme. You give me the songs, the great rock songs, the ones you love, that fit the bill, that meet the requirements for said Weekend Rock Project. And this weekend, we want your favorite rock songs that feature a musical instrument in the title. So obviously, first thing that comes to mind is what? Guitar. But there are others out there. There are plenty with guitar, but there are others out there that will meet the requirements for this weekend's Weekend Rock Project. Every Friday night on the Fortress of Rock Facebook page. And Sunday is New Music Sunday. Every Sunday I try to drop the best possible video for a new song out there, because we've got to keep rock and roll alive. We've got to listen to new music to keep these artists, to keep these bands, performers interested. Don't know what this Sunday's song will be. I have to admit the well is starting to run a little dry here around Christmas. I will figure it out, and I will still give you something fun, interesting, and hopefully brand new on Sunday afternoon for New Music Sunday on the Fortress of Rock Facebook page. So let's get into it. Doc Brown has given me the thumbs up. We are at speed. So now we can explore the rock and roll time stream, and we will begin with anniversaries for December the 20th. A guilty pleasure song that I love. And I gotta admit, I kind of love the band too, but not in the way you're thinking. On this day, December the 20th, 1986, the Bangles, Hubba Hubba, had the number one U.S. single with Walk Like an Egyptian. Great song. And the band not too hard on the eyes. Walk Like an Egyptian, the number one song in the U.S. on this day in 1986. On this day, December the 20th, 1974, very significant moment in rock and roll history. This was the day that Joe Walsh officially joined the Eagles. And Joe Walsh has added an extra dimension, a different musical dimension to the Eagles. And that's one of the great things about this band, is that the subtle transformations that they have gone through over the years, over the decades. Of course, Joe Walsh took over for, I believe, Bernie Leadon. But the addition of Timothy B. Schmidt and that softer sound, bringing in Joe Walsh with the slide guitar, the heavier, different sound, his vocals getting introduced into the mix once or twice on all the future Eagles albums. Very significant moment in rock and roll history as Joe Walsh joined the Eagles on this day in 1974. Here's an instance where, once again, I always say, researching this podcast always opens up new doors for me. Now, this is not necessarily rock and roll, but on this day, December the 20th, 1973, Bobby Darin passed away. And he was only 37 years old. I guess he had a weak heart. But as I started to look more into the career of Bobby Darin, because when I saw that he was only 37 when he passed, I just wanted to look a little bit deeper into his catalog, because we know his great songs. And again, it's not rock and roll, but it is popular music. Now, Bobby Darin, known to me most notably for Mac the Knife. So I can't get enough of Mac the Knife. I can't. Oh, the shark bites with its teeth, babe. Is that the right song? I don't know. Now that Mackie's back in town. I know that's right. But Mac the Knife, great, great, great lounge lizard type song. And then I saw Beyond the Sea. Oh, what a fantastic sound. Somewhere beyond the sea. Just, I won't sing anymore, I swear to God. But I became obsessed this afternoon with Bobby Darin. Of course, Mac the Knife and Beyond the Sea were both cover songs. Then he had Dream Lover, which was arguably his biggest hit. And he also started off his career with a song he wrote called Splish Splash. You remember Splish Splash? I was taking a bath long about a Saturday night. Yes, I just sang again. Sorry. So, what did I do? I went on Amazon and I ordered the 3 CD retrospective of Bobby Darin for $10. 75 songs for $10. And I'm like, come on. I gotta have this. I gotta have this. Mac the Knife, Beyond the Sea, Splish Splash, Dream Lover. There's gotta be a ton of other great songs on there. 75 songs, 3 CDs, $10. Had to do it. And as I always mention here on the Fortress of Rock, classic rock is 90% of what we're all about, but we always acknowledge other influences, whether it's some country music, rap, hip-hop, disco. We'll get to disco in a couple minutes here. Folk. We never try to be music snobs here. And the proof is in the pudding. I just laid down $10 for Bobby Darin. Finally, wrapping up anniversaries here. December the 20th, 1969. Peter, Paul, and Mary's. Folk music. See? See? Peter, Paul, and Mary's. Leaving on a Jet Plane was the #1 U.S. single on this day in 1969. And of course, do you know who wrote Leaving on a Jet Plane? John Denver. Interesting little fun fact you can spring on everybody at your office Christmas party. Great movie, by the way. Great funny movie. Jason Bateman, Jennifer Aniston. Great movie. Now we move on to birthdays for December the 20th. We mentioned this band in our last segment with the #2 album of 2024, Born on this day, December the 20th, 1966, Chris Robinson, lead singer for the Black Crowes. And I am hoping that Happiness Bastards is one of many great albums in their second act. Born on this day, December the 20th, 1959, Jackie Fox, bass player for the Runaways. Of course, all-time classic, all-girl band. Can you say all-girl band? Or is that sexist? Do you have to say all-woman band? I don't know. Here's our clarion call for the week to the disco era. Born on this day, December the 20th, 1957, Anita Ward. Call her a one-hit wonder, call her what you will, but she had one of the biggest, most memorable hits from the disco era, Ring My Bell. Anita Ward, born on this day in 1957. Also, born on this day, December the 20th, 1957, Billy Bragg. Now, I don't pretend to know a lot about Billy Bragg, but I do know about his connection with the band Wilco, and we'll mention them here a little bit later in the podcast. But Billy Bragg and Wilco put together a series of albums called Mermaid Avenue, where they were asked by the estate, the family of Woody Guthrie, to take some of his lyrics that never saw the light of day, and Billy Bragg and Wilco were asked to make these public, turn these into actual songs, because all the estate had were the lyrics. And that's where these Mermaid Avenue albums came from. Billy Bragg, born on this day in 1957. Born on this day, December the 20th, 1948, Alan Parsons. Of course, we all know the Alan Parsons Project, Games People Play, Eye in the Sky, many, many big hits. But he also claims his claim to fame. I'm not saying he claims, he was. His claim to fame on top of the Alan Parsons Project is that he was an engineer on two of the greatest albums in rock and roll history. Alan Parsons was an engineer for Abbey Road and Dark Side of the Moon, on top of the Alan Parsons Project. Pretty impressive resume for one Alan Parsons, born on this day in 1948. And then finally, in birthdays, born on this day, December the 20th, 1945, the great Peter Criss, original drummer, the Catman, for Kiss. Now, to me, there's always parallels to be drawn between the Beatles and Kiss. Both quartets, both established themselves as all-time fantastic groups, but they always kind of tried to be individuals on their own. And in both cases, sorry, but in both cases, the drummer was the weak link. Peter Criss, Ringo Starr, always ended up being fourth out of the four. And the funny thing was, the guitarist who kind of sat back in the shadows ended up being very significant influences both in the band and on their own, George Harrison and Ace Frehley. Whereas Lennon and McCartney and Simmons and Stanley thought they were the big shots, and they were, those guitarists kind of outdid them in many ways. And the drummers did have successful careers. And of course, Peter Criss sang on the biggest Kiss hit, even though it makes me want to throw up in a trash can nearby. He sang lead on Beth. Alright, almost done here, kids. One final segment, but over the past year we have done a lot to enhance our final segment to keep you to stick around all the way through the entire podcast. Segment 4 is, of course, Wrap It Up, our tribute to the fabulous Thunderbirds. We're powering down the DeLorean. I'm hopping out here. We're pulling the drawbridge up over the moat, getting ready to shut everything down so we can watch some college football playoff games starting Friday night tonight here locally, not very far away from the Fortress of Rock, Indiana and Notre Dame. But we still got business to take care of here, and that is to look at the future of rock and roll. We've looked at the past, and I want to go back. We've looked at the present in our first two segments, News of the World and Breakdown. Now we look to the future. Now I will admit, and I've been saying this again for the last 5 or 6 weeks, this time of year is very fallow. It is very weak when it comes to new music. We do have one new song on the agenda for the coming weeks. The 4th song from the Black Moods. Smaller band, a lot of you don't know them. If you've been listening to The Fortress over the past 3 years, you do know who they are. They're one of my favorite bands. They have a different release pattern with their new music than other bands. They like to release a lot of their songs up front over the course of a year, and then they finally get around to putting an album together. So we still have no new word on an upcoming album from the Black Moods, but they've released what I would say is the 4th song off of a mystery upcoming project. Let's put it that way. Circles is the latest song to be released from the Black Moods. And I will delve more into that in the next week or two when I get around to reviewing this song. And then we'll take in the whole picture with the Black Moods and what they've been doing with their new music, these new songs they've released over the last year. Now, in terms of our schedule for what we're going to be reviewing in the next month here on the Fortress of Rock, next week I am going to delve into a new EP, kind of sort of new EP from Wilco. And of course, we mentioned them earlier in relation to Billy Bragg and his birthday. These, kind of like U2, which we reviewed within the last month, the How to Reassemble an Atomic Bomb Leftover Tracks compilation. Wilco has put out an EP called Hot Sun, Cool Shroud, which is a handful of songs, not a full album, obviously an EP, of songs left over from the recording sessions from their last album. And I'm all for this. Do it. Let us judge. Let the fans judge. So next week I will review Wilco's new EP, Hot Sun, Cool Shroud, episode 176, dropping on December the 27th, 2024, the last episode of the year for the Fortress of Rock. And whereas last week I was a little bit kerfuffled, I didn't know how things were going to fall in terms of scheduling, with really no new music coming out in the foreseeable future, I fixed it. I fixed the problem. In 2 weeks, episode 177, dropping January the 3rd, 2025. I looked at my notes over the last couple months. I realized I have not reviewed yet for you the HBO Max documentary, Yacht Rock, a D-O-C-K, documentary. They have this group of music documentaries on Max called Music Box, and this happened to be one that just debuted a couple months ago. And as I mentioned, I look back and I go, I think I told you kids back in maybe November I was looking at reviewing this, and I've watched it, and I never reviewed it. So next week, 2 weeks, 2 weeks, Yacht Rock, a documentary, dropping January the 3rd, 2025. 3 weeks. 3 weeks. Now this I have not watched yet. As opposed to Yacht Rock, I have already watched it, prepared, got my notes going for that review in 2 weeks. In 3 weeks, I need to start watching this based on the book. I did not finish the book. I got halfway through. It is a massive, massive book. A book that recaps the glory days of hair metal from the 80s. Now it is a mini-series, a documentary mini-series on Paramount Plus that was also released a couple months ago. In 3 weeks, episode 178 of The Fortress of Rock on January the 10th, 2025, my review of Nothing But a Good Time on Paramount Plus. Again, that's my wheelhouse, the 80s hair metal music scene. Oh, I cannot wait. Rat, Quiet Riot, maybe a little bit of Van Halen, Motley Crue, of course, Poison. Cannot wait. And then in 4 weeks, that's when we get back and officially start the music year of 2025 with our first album review of the year. And that, of course, is Tremonti. The End Will Show Us How. Out on January the 10th. Need myself a full week. I need to give myself a full week to review this album. So, episode 179 on January the 17th of 2025 will be featuring The End Will Show Us How by Tremonti. Hopefully, we're going to start getting some news about some other new albums, because I checked Amazon the other night. Amazon's got a great pre-order group of pages where you can see the new albums that are coming out in the future. And there's nothing outside of Tremonti right now. That's depressing. So hopefully we're going to get some news. Maybe Mammoth 3, Mammoth WVH, their third album. I'm waiting on that. We'll see. But for right now, we're good. The next four weeks, full month episodes of The Fortress of Rock are set in stone, which leads us into the Fortress of Rock charts for the week. The second to last episode of 2024. And we just mentioned the first album review of 2025 will be Tremonti. The End Will Show Us How. So it only seems fitting that at least with 4 songs out from that album, a couple of those songs would probably be at the top of our charts here on the Fortress of Rock. Of course, the Fortress of Rock charts are a tribute to the old Billboard charts from the 70s and the 80s when they actually mattered. I already did my little rant about Billboard earlier, so that's it. But you might think this is boring. The top songs, and I always cheat and I always pick a couple songs, not just one, for the top of our Fortress of Rock charts every week. Same Tremonti songs as last week. And here's the thing. Now, first, the songs are the title track from the upcoming album, The End Will Show Us How, and The Mother, the Earth, and I. Again, both by Tremonti. Let me just point something out to you, a little eccentricity when it comes to me and how I run things here at the Fortress of Rock. Despite the fact that 4 songs have been released already in 2024 from this album, the album does not come out until January of 2025. Therefore, and ergo, none of these songs to me were eligible for the year-end awards in 2024. They will all be eligible for 2025. So let's just say I think Mark Tremonti's band has a stranglehold, a big-time early foothold on a couple songs at least, potentially, possibly making the top 5 at the end of 2025, a year from now, and yes, we'll still be around doing this. And it's most likely going to be these 2 songs. Once again, top songs this week on the Fortress of Rock, The End Will Show Us How, and The Mother, the Earth, and I, both by Tremonti. And then, what's the top album? Can't be Tremonti. It's not out yet. Can't be Tremonti, so what is it? Well, you could probably figure out that since I've had to go back and listen to all the great albums of 2024, it's got to be one of those. Last week was an example where No Name popped back up as the top album last week on the Fortress of Rock. This case is interesting because this is an album that did not make the cut for the top 5, but call me a little biased, I really kind of wanted sort of to get this album in my head and really break it down and get this album in the top 5, and I just couldn't do it. It's not good enough. It's close, but it's not good enough. But because I listened to it the most this week, and I still like the album a lot, the number 1 album this week on the Fortress of Rock is The Art of Letting Go by Miles Kennedy. So there you go, kids. That's going to do it for another magnificent episode of the Fortress of Rock. I am the Maestro, Kevin Crane. You are who you are. Have a great, fantastic Christmas. I hope you get every CD, double, triple LP, vinyl, deluxe edition, classic set that you want. Maybe you'll get a rock and roll documentary or 2 on Blu-ray. But remember, we've got to keep the rock and roll spirit alive. Buy physical when you can. That gets the artists and the bands more money than just listening to them on streaming. I know prices are high and times are still tough. Hug those kids. Love the one you're with. We'll do this again in 7 days, our last episode of 2024. Until then, I am the Maestro. Love y'all out there. Peace out.